So the beginning is the glance. And all of this is based upon the Sharia. I don't think it's my personal inclination. You can go back and read the Sharia in great detail. The first thing is the glance. Because many people like to begin with the woman. The Quran begins with the opposite. قل للمؤمنين يغضوا من أبصارهم ويحفظوا فروجهم ذلك أزكى لهم إن الله خبير بما يصنعون. Say to the believing men, lower your gaze. Wallahi, it doesn't make a difference to me what century you live in. The Quran says we're literalist people. We take the Quran literally. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ I want to be a believer. It says to the believing men, lower your gaze and guard your chastity, guard your private parts. So when people say to me, Ya Maulana, what about the television today? What about the satellite? What about the channels at the moment? The woman that comes on top of that channel, وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنِينَ يَغُضُّوا مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِمْ Say to the believing men, lower your gaze. Lower your gaze. There's no difference of opinion. Who's trying to play with the Sharia now? Who's trying to play with the Sharia and say, well, Murphy had it, there's no harm. The Quran is a direct statement, simple statements. Say to the believing men, if you see a woman in front of you, lower your gaze. Khalas, we'll lower our gaze. We're not going to argue about that. ذَلِكَ أَزْكَى لَهُمْ That's purifying for you. That's purifying. That's why you find a hadith that talk about person who lowers his gaze finds halawatul iman, finds a sweetness of iman you can't comprehend. But we've got a sickness in our hearts. We can't find that halawatul iman, that when you lower your gaze, you find a nur inside your heart. You find a good feeling that you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And then comes the women. وَقُلْ لِلْمُؤْمِنَاتِ يَغْضُضْنَ مِنْ أَبْصَارِهِنْ وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنْ وَلَا يُبْدِينَ زِينَتَهُنَّ إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنْ And say to the believing women, lower your gaze, lower your gazes in front of men who are غير محارم, who are not related to you. وَيَحْفَظْنَ فُرُوجَهُنْ And they preserve their private parts and their chastity. وَلَا يُبْدِينَ And they never reveal their zina, their beauty or their adornments, إِلَّا مَا ظَهَرَ مِنْهَا Whatever accidentally could become apparent from the hands or from walking, some aspect of a garment. Ma fi haraj. Look at the relaxation of Sharia. That happens. Ma fi haraj. No harm in that. وَلْيَضْرِبْنَ بِخُمُرِهِنَّ عَلَى جُيُوبِهِنَّ And tell them to cover their bodily parts. And the word is quite explicit to mention. That's the Sharia. So when people today are discussing about what's the role of the hijab, what's the role of the woman's dress, is it a bright pink color? Is it just a Calvin Klein hijab on the top of your head? And wear tight trousers and say I love Islam across your chest? Who taught you that Islam? Who taught you that type of Islam? Where does that come from? The Sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Your own understanding of Islam. It's nothing to do with your own understanding, your own inclination. And that's what's happening in our society. Wallahi, sometimes I feel like just stopping and saying to somebody, you might as well take that hijab off your head. Don't hold a cigarette in your hand and smoke. Don't hold hands with a boy in the street. Don't behave in that manner. Because I know for a fact when I was joking, when I was growing up, I never joked about the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. I had done something, I didn't do it. I didn't curtail myself behind some Islamic dress and understanding and pretend I'm trying to be Islamic. Or this is Islamic dress. This isn't Islamic dress. This is fashion and culture. That's what you're following. You're following a fashion and a culture. You're not following Islam. So that the Quran is saying, cover yourselves with the correct form of the jilbab. The way of the believing women. Ya ayyuhan nabiyyu qul li azwajika wa banatika wa nisa'il mu'minin. O Prophet of Allah, say to your wives, say to your daughters and say to the believing women, yudnina alayhinna min jalabibihin. Tell them to cover their bodily parts. So somebody says that's only for the Prophet's wives sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. But the verse is saying, say to your wives, say to your daughters, and say to the believing women. And your qudwa, your person that you resemble is ummahatul mu'mineen, the mothers of the believers. That we resemble and copy them, and likewise the women should resemble and copy them. That's the proverb, that's the understanding. What the eye does not see, the heart doesn't desire, doesn't perceive that. You can't see something, you don't know nothing about it. You can't seem to do anything beyond that, because everything is sealed in front of you. And as you find many athar, many such wordings, some people like to attribute these as the words of the Prophet Muhammad, but they are da'if in nature. But the meaning is true. An-nadhratu sahmun min sahami iblis. The glance is from amongst one of the arrows of shaitan, of iblis. That the glance is there. That is the arrow, the first arrow of shaitan. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu la tattabi'u khutuwati shaitan. or you believe, don't follow the footsteps of the devil. وَمَنْ يَتَّبِعْ خُطُوَاتِ الشَّيْطَانِ فَإِنَّهُ يَأْمُرُ بِالْفَحْشَاءِ وَالْمُنكَرِ. Whoever follows the footsteps of the devil, because shaitan only orders you munkar, evil things, and al-fawahish, illicit, all types of illicit sexual behavior. You find in the hadith, لَكَ الْأُولَى وَلَيْسَ لَكَ الثَّانِيَةِ. You have the first glance of sudfa, apparent glance. Somebody comes in front of you, you have that first glance. وَلَيْسَ لَكَ الثَّانِيَةِ. You don't have the second glance. But once again, that sickness, many of us say that, Mawlana, I'm still in my first glance. You think you're the only shabab. Read the seerah of the shabab, Hawlur Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Read the young men around the Prophet Muhammad. You think you're the only one with temptation, desires. If my memory serves me correct, Ibn Abbas, one of the other companions, riding, and his eye falls upon a woman, and he's glancing and he's fixing upon her. The Prophet Muhammad turns his face around. Does it again he turns his face around. Simplicity. That is what the Prophet Muhammad understood these people, and he highlighted that. لَكَ الْأُولَى وَلَيْسَ كَالثَّانِيَةِ. He said to Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. You have the first, but you don't have the right to follow that glance again. All of a sudden something comes apparent in front of you, turn away, glance away. That if this was something shay basit, something trivial, then I don't think the Prophet Muhammad would turn his companion's face away. Reflect upon that. If something trivial, he wouldn't turn his beloved ones away, the face away, because he understands what could happen next. The concept of coming out in society, in one's ordainments, is nothing but a way of jahiliyyah, of ignorance. You find many ahadith, a woman who comes out of her home, not attiring herself correctly, is tasrafa her shaitan. Shaitan will glorify or beautify her. You find another hadith that's narrated in Ustadh of Imam Hakim, and checked by the late Sheikh Nasiruddin al-Albani rahmatullahi alayhi. Any woman who comes out of her house, perfuming herself, every single eye that looks at her, فَإِنَّهَا هِيَ زَانِيَةٌ. She's an adulterous woman. That's not my words. That's the words of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi
هي أمتي تاج الأمم ودرة العرش المكين. هذا الرداء من التكاسل والخمول ستخلعين.